Your credibility and your integrity has to be your currency, because in order for you to perform, you need people to trust you. Now, they must have known that to try and come to me, wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to let that door open, even a tiny, tiny inch, because they knew that I would report too. For me, that's too far. And where, again, that's out of my control, but this is where some of the credibility for the sport needs to come in.
I felt so confident that it didn't matter that I was in that male-dominated industry, because I felt so ready for it.
I would have a crack at referees and that sort of thing, and I'd always be embarrassed afterwards. I suppose a lot of them would argue that you always thought you knew the laws of the game, so it was only natural that you decided to do it yourself.
Welcome to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Our mission is to protect the integrity of sport and the health and welfare of those who participate in Australian sport.
Hello and welcome to Onside. I'm Tim Gable. In this episode, we're looking at match officials in sport. Referees and umpires are constantly in the spotlight. They're under enormous pressure to get the decisions right. So what motivates them? How do they cope with the pressure and social media? Our guests are former leading Australian soccer referee Ben Williams, who officiated in some of the world's biggest tournaments, including the World Cup in Brazil. Kasey Badger referees in the New South Wales Cup Rugby League competition and has been a touch judge for the NRL for over 110 games, and is close to making her debut as an NRL referee. In many respects, Kasey is a trailblazer for women seeking to be involved in the sport, especially as a referee. And our third guest is Grant Jones. Grant played first-grade rugby union for the Queanbeyan Whites in the ACT competition. He's also been involved in matchday activities such as running the water. A few years ago, he was called before the judiciary and was informed that he had to do a referee's course, and he's now a referee. We'll hear from all three in just a moment. And excitement is building with just over a month to go until the Olympic Games. With Tokyo 2020 fast approaching, we've designed an educational course to help competing Australian Olympic and Australian Paralympic team members navigate the rules and legislation around doping control. And coming up soon is our special podcast series, Clean and Gold, which will celebrate everything Olympic and Paralympic. Well, our first guest is former leading A-League and international soccer referee Ben Williams. And Ben, just how much pressure are referees and sporting officials under in this modern day? Because not only what happens on the field, you've got obviously people on the sideline in the crowd, but also social media. It seems as though there's a lot of pressure on referees and match officials these days.
Yeah, well, there's always going to be pressure on officials, and I guess the way the professional sport has gone now, it's moving more towards a business, and teams and clubs and sports need to make money to be sustainable. So we get that as officials, and I guess that's why there is that pressure, because if there's results that go the wrong way, coaches get sacked, players have to move clubs. It may be that a team, loses their franchise, etc. So we understand all that pressure. At the same time, really the pressure placed upon referees is between our two ears. So it's the pressure we place on ourselves to perform, and no referee really goes out there to be the centre of attention and take all the glory, because if you were doing that, well, would you sign up to be a referee in the first place? It is about the game, and that's what you want the focus on. At the same time, if called upon, in your duties and responsibilities, you're called upon at various times to make calls that are required by the game, and sometimes those decisions change the game. You hope that that's not the case, and you hope that the decisions that you take are the correct ones. So that's really the pressure. It's about the same as a striker would want to score goals, or a goalkeeper wants to stop goals. Referees want to make sure that they're getting their decisions and fulfilling their role the best that they possibly can.
Integrity is the key, isn't it, to being a good referee?
100%. And in fact, that's your currency. Your credibility and your integrity has to be your currency, because in order for you to perform, you need people to trust you. And if you don't have any integrity, or you've lost, there's a shine that's taken off, then you lose the trust of the people, whether that be the viewing public, whether that be the teams or the coaches, and therefore your performance is always critiqued that little bit more. You don't want those kind of connotations around you as a referee, and that was something that I was always really strong around, is that I wanted my integrity was never to be bought.
Were there attempts to buy you?
Yeah, absolutely. Gone were the days of the old brown paper bag, but lots of trips overseas where there was gifts. There was bags of stuff left on my hotel room door.
What did you do?
So we've got a whole process that we go through. We had lots of presentations with Interpol, because organised crime out there. Obviously, football being probably the biggest sport in the world, there's a lot of money involved, and usually, and this is what I learnt through Interpol, was that they would go for the players first. They had the most direct way to influence a match, and then the next ones were the referees. Usually because referees aren't paid anything like the players are. And they've got other things, that are going on. So I always, in my mentality, was nothing for nothing, So if there's gifts, and we had boundaries around what kind of gifts could be given and costings and all that kind of stuff. If it was a team had won the championship, they were allowed to, provide you the jersey and all that, all those kinds of things. But there was times where they'd take you shopping, and maybe it was a flat screen TV. I say, anything in here? Yep, you can have it. So I was really particular, and I didn't just work with people from Australia. I worked with people from other countries, and they wanted to accept. And if I was the referee, I was the captain of the team, and I said, well, whatever you normally do, that's on my team, that's not happening. And so we would go, and I'd report to the match commissioner and match referee assessor, to make sure that everything was out there straight away before the game, and that they knew that I was not corruptible.
I would imagine there are referees that are corruptible, though.
Absolutely. And I guess in every profession, right across the board, there's going to be good people and bad people, and people that make choices that they probably shouldn't. And at the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the game. It's bigger than the fans. It's bigger than the players. It's certainly bigger than the referees. And we want to try and make sure that the game is left in a better place than we found it. So if I would put my selfishness in front of that whole gambit of the game, well, I'm certainly not doing my job. And that's really what it is. That's selfishness. When people take bribes, or their integrity is allowed to be clouded, then they're not doing what is in the best interest of the game.
Had you ever refereed a game where you thought that match fixing might have been taking place?
There was one match I remember where I didn't find out until after the game, because I just went out and refereed the way I was supposed to referee, and I found out that the result was supposed to be 3-1.
And what was the score?
Oh, it wasn't 3-1. Yeah, so now they must have known that to try and come to me, wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to let that door open, even a tiny, tiny inch, because they knew that I would report too. And that was the thing. Anyone that would come to me with gifts, or sometimes it was women, they'd try anything. So always nothing for nothing,
So they tried to get you in a compromising situation?
I remember one particular country, it was even after the match. So it wasn't even trying to set me up for match fixing. It was actually in a few weeks' time, other Australian officials were coming, and they said, "Oh, you've got a very long flight ahead of you. It's really important that you relax." And I knew exactly what was going on. I said, "No, nobody's coming to my room." And I told my two assistant referees, "You receive a knock on the door, don't answer it." Because there were other Australian referees that were going to be there in a couple of weeks' time, and their hope was that we would tell them, that we're offered all this, and then they would be, the beneficiaries of that. Not on my watch.
What about the abuse? Because you copped more than your fair share of abuse, didn't you? I saw one headline, glorious career and all that. So Twitter rejoices, because they just love to get into you, didn't they? How did you respond to that, and what sort of abuse did you get?
Yeah, well, I mean, the people that write all that stuff and say all that stuff and the keyboard warriors, they don't know me. They don't know Ben Williams. And the people that I know and love, they know who I am. And really, they're the only opinions that matter. So in terms of refereeing performances, I know if I have a bad match, my wife will still love me, my family will still love me. And if I have a great match, they'll still love me. The referee assessors, we are, in terms of integrity, you're scrupulous in terms of the assessment and the analysis that goes on. Whereas I don't think the viewing public generally understand that. They think, the referee just turns up on the day, and if they like our team, they'll give a decision this way, and if they don't, they'll send somebody off or give a penalty against us. And, I think people like jumping on the bandwagon too. And it's a bit like theatre. Sport is theatre. And sometimes theatre needs villains, and I guess I got painted that way a little bit in Australia. But at the end of the day, well, that's that was out of my control. All I could go out and do was perform the best that I knew how. That I'd been trained at AFC level and FIFA level. I got the latest information from the top dogs right in Zurich. So I had to go into each match thinking, well, who knows their job better than anyone else? I know my job better than anyone else, better than anyone on the Twitter sphere. The fans in the stadium. Of course, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And when I'm a fan, of course, we always look at it from a different angle because when the Socceroos are playing or whether Australia's playing in the cricket, you want your country and your team to do well. Whereas referees, we have to be straight down the line because it is about that integrity.
I remember a particular match, Iran versus Iraq at Canberra Stadium, 2015. Yep. It was a quarter-final in the Asian Football Confederation. Can you tell us the aftermath of that game? Because I know you got death threats and you're worried about the safety of your family.
Yeah, well, look, even before the match, myself and my two assistant referees, we looked at the draw and we thought, what, if this team goes through from this group and this team goes through from that group, it could be Iran versus Iraq in Canberra, and we knew that was a big match. And we said, look, they're the types of matches that you want to be involved in. You want to be pitting yourself up against the best and the most challenging situations. Now, in all of my matches, and I refereed a lot, that was probably the most challenging match I've ever had. There was so much more than football at stake that day. Two countries that have been at war for 9 years. It was never going to be a walk in the park. So I was quite proud that they trusted me. AFC trusted me and my team to take part in that match and take control of that match. Now, yeah, there was a situation early in the match where I had to caution one Iranian player, and then later on just before half time, he dived in the penalty area and he was trying to cheat. So we talk about integrity. He was trying to take the integrity away from that game. Now I'd asked him a number of times to get up because there was nothing doing, and he said no, there's something here, and I said, look, that's it. If you can't do it, it's going to be a yellow card. And so I gave him the yellow card and I walked off. And probably the thing that I did wrong was not immediately identify that, because he was sitting on the ground, I couldn't see his number, that it was the same player that I'd cautioned earlier on. So 2 yellow cards is a red card. So that's where the controversy came in. The decisions themselves were fine, but I guess that delay, maybe people thought the credibility was gone. Anyway, that was certainly the angle that the Iranian coach took, and then the Australian media really jumped on, and because I was already the villain in the A-League, they jumped on that. And then
the coach actually walked onto the field at the end of the game. I was watching it in the grandstand. I thought, that there's something happening here because of the fire that was generated in the match in the crowd.
Yep. Yeah.
You could have been worried for your safety there.
To be honest, I don't even remember that. And there's that much going on, and that match had absolutely everything. So from the purist, or if you weren't aligned to Iran or Iraq, so many people that I speak to now that have been in Canberra and weren't even football people said, I was at that game and it had everything, and the crowd was going bananas, and so I actually feel really blessed to be selected for that match and be out there in the middle. And even with the drama and the theatre of it all, two very, very experienced Iranian, the captain and one of the other Iranian players who'd spent 10 or 12 years in European football. In the heat of the moment, they turned to me, and we'd known each other for a long time, and they said, Ben, have you ever been involved in a game like this? And I said, they said, you've been around a while, we've been around a while. How about this? And we had a moment, but at the same time, they're also the ones trying to put pressure on you because they want they want to try and bend your integrity, really, all for the benefit of their team. Now, even with the coach coming on at the end of a game, that's all the theatre, because the coach is being paid money by people to do a job, and then it's easier to deflect onto a referee than say, you know what, we were beaten. And look, a send-off can change a match, but at the same time, cheating can change a match as well, and that's why I guess we get entrusted with the whistle, and I don't shy away from that.
What about the aftermath?
The aftermath, well, the referees were based at Homebush for the whole tournament. So, unless it was a Brisbane game, we would drive to and from the matches. So, you'd drive in and stay the night before. So we got put up at the Hyatt here in Canberra, so did the match, and then we had our bags packed already, and the idea was straight out of Bruce Stadium back up the highway. We had. The AFP were with every refereeing trio, every refereeing team for every match. We got to know them really well. They're a really good bunch of guys and girls that were there to look after us, keep our safety, because that's also keeping the integrity of sport. And then those particular police officers went on to the cricket 2020 World Cup. So. I'm not on social media, never have been, never will be, because people are never going to say it was a really well refereed game and it really allowed the game to flow and all the adulation. But my wife is, and I spoke to her after the game. I said, look, just don't read it, just turn it off, don't read it. There were death threats. I had a 3-month-old at that stage, so they were saying, we'll kill your wife or kill your child. And to the point where my wife did read it and didn't feel safe staying at home, so she went and stayed with her mum that night. And for me, that's too far. And where, again, that's out of my control, but this is where some of the credibility for the sport needs to come in, and that was some of the Australian media, unfortunately, that kind of really propagated that hate. And I like to think I'm pretty strong-minded, pretty resilient type of person, but my family's off limits, Yeah. And at the same time, people that maybe weren't mentally as strong potentially, there could be a whole heap of depression and anxiety that come from this for match officials, because I think that's often what people forget too, is that match officials are humans. I listened to your podcast on mental health with some of the former athletes and the psychologists, and we talk a lot about the mental health of athletes, but there's also massive problems with mental health of officials, because they're not as well resourced. And there's been situations where, been big decisions that have changed matches, not just here in Australia, but right around the world. And there's been situations where officials have felt that pressure that you spoke about at the start, and have gone on and done the unthinkable and committed suicide. And that's certainly not the answer. So that's why I've always been one to kind of stand up and try and speak up. If people don't think I'm popular because of that, I don't care. It's about, again, doing what's right for the game.
When you retired, was it a relief more than anything else? Yeah,
look, I think it was. All through my career, I never really allowed myself to get run away with what we're achieving. And I say we as in my assistants and I, because we did it as a team. But now upon retirement, I can reflect and think, well, I was that little kid in Canberra, in Canberra that saw the Olympics on TV and thought, wow, how good would that be? And saw the World Cup on TV and thought, unbelievable. And I lived it, So we didn't allow ourselves to kind of lose our focus at the time of going through it. But now, upon reflection, we're really proud of what we did. In terms of relief, I remember the moment I was in the middle of an A-League match when I realised I don't want to do this anymore. And I've got a little girl at that stage, and she's standing on the end of an aero bridge saying, "Daddy, please don't go." And really that's I got to the point where I thought, what, I've achieved what I want to achieve in sport. I spoke with my wife, can we go another 4 years for another World Cup? and it's a big ask for a family. And she said, I don't think we can do that. And out of respect for her, I want to be with my family. So that was the kind of time I decided to say, well, now it's time to rather let the next generation come through and go and spend time with my beautiful family.
The media came in for special attention, I noticed, in a player's voice piece that you did. You said that the media in Australia really didn't understand football and they generated a lot of hate towards you. On reflection, do you still think that was the case?
Yeah, I think there's a responsibility because we need to think about people as people first and foremost. It doesn't matter whether they've got a disability. It doesn't matter if they're black. It doesn't matter if they're white. It doesn't matter if they're a player being paid lots of money. It doesn't matter if they're a referee. We need to treat people with respect. And I don't feel that I got that respect. It's not you become a referee and it's instantaneous. You have to earn respect. And it wasn't actually about me. I still see now, I've been retired, going on 4.5 years now, and nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Has the level of respect increased for referees? I don't think so. I think it's actually probably gone backwards. We talk about VAR now. I retired just before that came in, and that was going to be the big. This will solve all our problems, and the refereeing so terrible that we need video referees, and now. What happens? People are still talking in coffee shops about the VAR. Oh, should they have got involved? Did they do the right thing? Did they not? People are never going to be happy. So for me, it comes back to that respect. Let's just show people respect. And the same way that a striker earning $200 million a year can miss a goal right in front of goal, or a goalkeeper misses an absolute sitter, and they're being paid all that money. That's accepted. Oh, bad luck. Get the next opportunity. For referees, that's never accepted. And we think about the resourcing that goes into match officials, and not just in my sport, but in all sports, versus that goes into players. It's chalk and cheese. So, yeah, it comes back to that level of respect. Let's treat people the way we want to be treated. Would you like that being said about your family, your loved one, your children, your mum, your dad? No? Okay, well, let's take a little bit of a step back and realise what can be the hurtful thing that comes from these words.
If I can just ask you a final question, do you think in Australia we really struggle to show respect to people in control, in positions of power or authority? Do you think that's part of it in Australia? Yeah,
I think so. And it's hard because, I'm a proud Aussie. I love we are in the lucky country, and we're so lucky. Every time I used to fly back into Australia, and you'd breathe that sigh of relief, because even though you might have been off to another great opportunity overseas, flying back to our country is the best thing in the world, and we know that now even more with all the COVID stuff. In terms of respecting that authority, certain countries have that level given. You think about Japan and China, and to teachers and police and all that kind of stuff. I think if there was a police officer sitting where I am right now, they'd certainly never say they get respect. They don't get the respect they deserve. They get spat on and all this kind of stuff. I'm a teacher also. It's something that you need to earn. And I think that at the crux of all this, it comes down to relationships. And the more that we can spend and understand people, from their different side of things, what is their story? And I guess refereeing doesn't usually get an opportunity to tell its story, so people don't understand. So they go and make assumptions, and often those assumptions are wrong because they're not an educated assumption. And I guess when I fired back in the media, that's pretty much what I was saying. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but make it an educated one. Come down. We invited some Fox Sports people down to our referees camp, full-time referees camp, when we were there, and they turned up late. And came in, and rather than be an observer about how we went through, post-match analysis and preparation for the next matches, they kind of stood up and thought that they were the guest keynote speaker, and started telling us how to do our job. I think, well, no, this is our workplace. You need to respect it. The same way I wouldn't go into somebody else's workplace and tell them how to do their job. You come to seek understanding, and I think with understanding, this goes this goes far beyond refereeing. This is the Black Lives Matter. This is how we entreat our Indigenous people, how we entreat women, how we treat people with disabilities. This is about coming back to that respect. And I think the more we share, the more forums that we have like this, where we can talk about different sides and different opinions, then we can understand, oh, yeah, right, I didn't know that about them. And maybe next time I won't be so harsh to be critical. I'll actually come in from that empathetic point of view. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the better thing for sport. That's going to be the better thing for sport. When COVID hit us, as people loving sport, there's so many parents that thought, oh, well, we don't get to take our kids to sport, and we're saving all this money and we're doing all these other things. Maybe I won't go back to sport. Now more than ever, we need to come together. All facets of every single game, not just football, every single game we need to come together and understand and take our country forward. And that will improve the mental well-being of all of us and the physical well-being of all of us. And, that's the health of the population. And hopefully that's the kind of trajectory we want to be on for Australia as a sporting nation. Getting back to those days where we are going off to Tokyo and winning all these gold medals and going off to World Cups. And, we've got a lot of success still. You think about the Matildas and the women's cricket team and, so there's still a lot of that. We've got to make sure that we don't fall by the wayside, and we keep the big picture in the front of our minds at all times.
Ben, thanks very much for joining us on Onside. It's been great to chat.
Thank you very much, Tim.
You're listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia.
This is Onside. Well, our next guest is rugby league referee Kasey Badger, and Kasey is passionate about the game. She started refereeing in Year 12. And Kasey, I would imagine an unusual pursuit for somebody in Year 12.
Yeah, it's not on the regular list of sports to choose from, I guess. I started playing the game as a 4-year-old and played through till I was 12. And back then there were no avenues for girls to continue playing through sort of teenage years. There was a women's competition, but I had to wait till I turned 18 to play there. So when I was 16 in high school, I just had a friend who wanted to go and do the referee's course, and he basically just wanted someone to go along with him just for company. So I went, oh, all right, yep, I'll give that a crack. Not really thinking much of it. I sort of thought it would be a piece of paper, a certificate that I would put in my CV when I left school. But all of a sudden started doing it and fell in love with it.
Apart from your sheer passion for the game, what do you like about it?
I think it's an extremely challenging pursuit. I don't think there's many things, many sports that throw up as many challenges as refereeing does. Obviously, firstly, I love the game of rugby league, but I also love to be challenged. And when you referee, there are so many things you need to take into account. No two games are alike. No two situations are alike. You're continually learning. You're continually challenged, and you need to make decisions quickly. You don't have time to really think and process and sort of take your time to weigh things up. You have to do things very instinctively, and that was just something that really appealed to me.
So, you've been in the system for a little while now. You've been in the NRL system for 6 seasons, full-time for the last 2. Do you feel as though you're just on the cusp at the moment of getting a first-grade game as a referee?
Yeah, I do, although I have felt like that for a few years now. So hopefully it does come. Obviously, 2020 threw a big spanner in the works for everyone in terms of their career development. The competition was stopped. We went back from 2 refs to 1 ref on the field. So obviously any opportunity was cut in half. And prior to that, I also had a pretty bad run of injuries. I had a few back-to-back surgeries and a few things that sort of kept me not in the physical space that I wanted to be in. So I definitely feel like I'm mentally ready. I definitely feel physically ready now. It's just a matter of waiting for an opportunity to present itself.
It's very much a male domain. How do you find that aspect of it? Because, you're refereeing men's sport, and I would imagine that there is a fair bit of, that male dominance, as I've just mentioned. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, there definitely is. I guess it's one of those things that being involved in it for so long, you do become accustomed to it, because from day one it's that's just the landscape of the sport, the landscape of the job. I guess for me, to be able to get through it, I just had to know that I was doing everything right, and I knew that I knew the game. I did everything I could to do as much work on the game as from a football side of things, and from a refereeing side, a technical refereeing side of things, so that I felt so confident that it didn't matter that I was that I was in that male-dominated industry, because I felt so ready for it. I felt so knowledgeable in that space. So it sort of didn't bother me. But there are small things along the way, and even to this day, where the system is catered for men. It's much more comfortable to be a man in this industry than it is to be a woman. So there are little things that are just daily little battles to get through. But slowly the industry is changing.
What about the players? How do they react to you? Because, there's yourself and Belinda Sharp, very much a well-known referee. How do they react to you?
Yeah, from my experience, once you've hit the semi-professional and then professional game, I found the players outstanding. I think in the lower levels of the game, that's where I found more challenges. Around that sort of park football level or entry level through the ranks, that's when there seems to be more pressure on you, or more personal attacks on you for being female. At the elite level, the players are outstanding. I've actually found that I think sometimes they respond better to me than they do to some of the guys. It's a catch-22 in being a female in such a male-dominated industry with the players, in that you become more recognisable a lot earlier on. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes it can be bad. So where a male referee might referee a team, early on in the season, and for whatever reason that team or that player didn't like that referee or that performance or a certain decision, and then that referee has them 10 weeks, 12 weeks later, in the lower grade, in the sort of just below NRL grades, a lot of the times the players wouldn't remember that referee 10, 12 weeks later, whereas they remember you as a female. And like I said, sometimes if you're performing well, that can be a good thing. I think at the elite level, the players have, I have felt that they have a certain level of respect for Belinda and I, in sort of seeing what we do and sort of understanding that we are, unique as females in the game. And I think there's a certain level of respect that they've shown us. I can't speak highly enough for the players at the elite level. What
about abuse on social media and from the fans? How do you cope with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think for referees, I think it's very, it becomes a very personal decision as to whether you get on social media or not. For myself, and I know my husband's very similar, we're very active on social media. We see it as something that allows us a way to communicate with fans and give our point of view on things, explain certain rules. There was something that happened in a State of Origin game the other night that someone tweeted a question to me, and I just responded back with what the ruling was, and it can become a positive engagement piece there. But on the other side, it's very easy for people to send abusive messages. You go into your DMs folder and there'll be, after games, there can be a bunch of messages or mentions there which are negative, which unfortunately it shouldn't happen, but it does. It's a very easy space for people to criticise you. So for me, I find that I can deal with that. I can cope with that criticism. It doesn't get me down. I don't dwell on it. So I see the positives of social media, where I can promote refereeing, promote referees as just being fans of the game, and show that positive side of what we do. But I totally understand for other people how being on social media can become too much. The abuse can become quite disheartening.
Yes, you both yourself and your husband Gavin Badger, well-known referee, now retired and involved in the West Tigers amongst other teams. You come across with high integrity. How important is integrity in refereeing, do you think?
Oh, it's the number one. It's the number one thing. If you want to be a referee at any level, the number one thing is that you've got is your integrity. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is going to be perfect. Doesn't matter how many games you've done. Doesn't matter what level of the game you're at. No refereeing performance is perfect. Just the same way as no playing performance is perfect. But as long as you're making your decisions with integrity, that's all that anyone can really ask of you. And a lot of the times at the elite level with refereeing, perception of your integrity can be a big thing as well. So there can be small things that you do when you move about the community, or where you speak to people in public or on social media, where you can have all the integrity in the world, but it can come across as perhaps you don't. There are small things people pick on. You could be out with your kids, and because you're a rugby league family, of course your kids love the game, and your kids might be wearing a jersey of a team, or like a certain player, or cheer for a certain team, or whatever it might be, and people can see that as perhaps that you don't have the integrity that you should have. So there's a real fine balance in refereeing between perception and reality as well.
Yes, you're right there. And your husband Gavin is your number one supporter, isn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's been there, done that. How do you find it at home? Do you argue about refereeing decisions that you're watching on TV at the time, or?
The way I try to explain it to people is that, like in many relationships and many marriages, there are people who love the game, so they talk about rugby league. And for us, that's no different. Rugby league is something that we both grew up with. It's something that we both absolutely love. So of course we talk about it, but we talk about it in all aspects. We talk about it with development and pathways of the game. Where Gavin works at the moment with New South Wales Rugby League, he's heavily invested in the junior pathways and development with refereeing. So we talk about it from that aspect. We talk about it when just a game's on TV, just as fans of the game, just watching the game, watching certain players and how the game unfolds. And then, of course, refereeing conversations come up as well. A lot of the things we think in terms of rules and refereeing is very similar, but there's occasionally things that we that we do disagree on. But like anyone, you just have that conversation, and we just love the game. So for us, our lives revolve a lot around rugby league, but it never feels like it's too much.
That's great, Kasey. Thanks very much for joining us today on Onside. It's been great to have a chat, and your insights are very, very valuable, I think, to young referees in particular coming through. Thanks again for your time.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for having me.
Our third guest is former first grade rugby union player in the ACT competition, Grant Jones. He's now a referee. Well, Grant, how did you become involved in refereeing? How did it all start for you?
Well, rather embarrassingly, I had an appointment with the judiciary after I said something. I was running water for Queanbeyan first grade. I think it was 2017. 2017 it would have been. I was running water for first grade, and I said something to the touch judge along the lines of, when's this referee going to give us a crack, or now he owes one after that decision, or something along those lines. It was a game at Jamison, and it wasn't. I didn't swear. I didn't, but it was something I shouldn't have said. Anyway, I got referred to the judiciary as a result. Adam Fay was the coach of first grade at the time, and suggested that part of my rehabilitation will be that Grant will do the requirements to become a level 1 referee and referee some games, and I did that. When I said I was going to do it, I made sure I did it, and I did 2 junior games at the end of that season, and I thought, that wasn't too bad, and it sort of went from there, and refereed some junior games then, 2018, 19. 2019, I started getting opportunities with some senior games, and then sort of just done senior games since.
So did it surprise you when you sort of started doing it, you realised what referees go through?
It did surprise me from a viewpoint that there is more to look at in a game than, you know, what you might look at from a spectator. Like an example might be you've got a scrum and you've got to worry about the bind, you've got to worry about the back rowers staying on, you've got to worry about the backs being on side, and then you're looking at the ball coming out the back, and then you're looking at if somebody's infringing at the front of the scrum, then you're looking at, you know, have they crept offside. So it probably surprised, like where you're sitting on the sideline and you're only looking at the things you want to look at or the things that go against your team. So I suppose it surprised me that the challenges they face in making the decisions and getting them right. And I think I realise now that referees aren't always going to get them right. So yeah.
Have you copped any abuse yourself?
No, I haven't. I don't know if that's luck or whether it's a sign of me doing something right. I think I benefit from being a former player and knowing the club scene in Canberra quite well. So when I go to a game, you know, quite often I'll talk to the coach or the captain or somebody from the club beforehand, and they know who I am, and I think I have a respect that I've, you know, come from where they are to become a referee, and I think that has helped me. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, but for me personally, I haven't copped abuse. Yes, I've gone, oh, come on, ref, or he's offside, or you're kidding, or that sort of thing, but not abuse as such.
Do you think that more players should become match officials, whether it be rugby union, AFL, rugby league?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've spoken to, you know, people that are involved in AFL and league and obviously a lot of people in rugby union. And this is easy for me to say, and it's no disrespect to the officials that haven't done this, but I think people that come from a club as a player or even a coach or that sort of thing, I think if more players and people involved in clubs become referees, I actually think it will help lift the standard of referees, and I hope not many people pay attention to what I do, but I hope that I can help from our club at least break down those barriers. It's not going to happen overnight, but I hope that it does happen.
Tell us about when you were playing. You know, obviously, you know, players say things to referees. Were you one of those players? Yeah,
I was. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say I was. I would have a crack at referees and that sort of thing, and I'd always be embarrassed afterwards, and I'm a very competitive person, and I can be short-tempered, and I would say something, you know, in the heat of the moment to a referee and go, shit, I shouldn't have done that, but and I feel as though opinions were made of me within ACT Rugby because of the competitive nature I have, and I absolutely said things I shouldn't have said to referees, and part of me is glad that I've done it because I feel as I'm giving back a little bit to the Referees Association that, you know, I probably gave a hard time to for a while.
Obviously, your former teammates, are they surprised to see you refereeing now, given that you were so vocal towards referees when you were playing?
Yes, I suppose they are surprised. But I suppose good friends of mine aren't surprised that it's something that I'd challenge myself to do, and I suppose a lot of them would argue that you always thought you knew the laws of the game, so it was only natural that you decided to do it yourself. So yeah, I think yes and no would be the answer to that question.
Have you got aspirations to go higher in refereeing?
I didn't when I started. I was like, no, I'm happy to do, you know, junior games in 3rd and 4th grade and help to lift the standard. But I think naturally the type of person I am, and the more I get involved, I go, yes, I do want to, and it's probably to challenge myself more than anything. I've started to do a couple of Colts games now and go, geez, that's a step up, and I've enjoyed that challenge. so I suppose I would have aspirations to, move into second grade and Colts more permanently, and then if good enough, an opportunity arose further, yeah.
There is a problem at the moment, isn't there, in encouraging people to become referees. People said, I'm not going to go there and get abused. People won't like me. I'll have no friends. There are many aspects to it, aren't there?
Yeah. I don't know what the single biggest deterrent is. Abuse is the one that's always trotted out by the Referees Association as the biggest deterrent, and it might be that is, the referees that do give it away. I personally, I think it's more the stigma of somebody going from clubland and moving into be a referee. The bloody referees, they're hopeless and whatever, and you don't want to be your mates to say, oh, you're one of them now. Where I've been able to, I'm vice president of the Queanbeyan Whites, so I'm very much involved in my club, and then I can still go and referee a game on the weekend. So it's sort of like, I think people think they either need to be a referee or need to be associated with a club, where I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think I'm an example of that. So.
Good on you. Great to see you out there refereeing on a weekly basis in Canberra, and hopefully it encourages more players to become involved in being match officials, not just rugby union.
I hope so, yeah.
Good on you, Grant. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tim.
And now for our segment From Left Field, where we answer a question from the public.
Today's question is, what is an athlete biological passport and why do we use it? The Athlete Biological Passport is an electronic record that monitors a number of biological variables within an athlete. This record is developed over time through multiple sample collections and can reveal certain biomarkers of doping that indicate an athlete is using a prohibited substance. This method is yet another way we can detect doping, but does not require the substance itself to be detected. It's important to remember that there are 11 anti-doping rule violations and only one of them requires a positive test.
Well, thanks for listening to Onside. I'm Tim Gable, and a reminder, we'll be releasing our Clean and Gold podcast series in the lead up to the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics. See you soon.
You've been listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Send in your podcast questions or suggestions to media@sportintegrity.gov.au. For more information on Sport Integrity Australia, please visit our website www.sportintegrity.gov.au or check out our Clean Sport app.